Call the meeting to order. I'll start over.
There we go. Sorry, you should be good now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see now, I'm after 4 o'clock, yeah. Let the record show that we call the meeting to order at 4 o'clock. I just want to call the roll to make sure everybody is with us. Member Baxter. Member Gessie. I can't hear me. Member Harrison.
I'm here.
I'm here too, sorry. Patsy,
It's
Gessie.
okay. I can see you up there. I just want to make sure I got everything. Member Hogan.
I'm here.
Member Michelle.
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Taylor. Member Lightfoot phoned in. She's unable to attend this afternoon. And Member McGuire and Member McCann tendered their resignation. So moving on to number 2. Is there any late items for today's agenda?
Counselor Hay, I was wondering if we could have a short discussion about the debris removal and the archaeological permitting.
Sure can. Can you just hang with me for a second?
Yep.
These guys should be at the
Either,
top.
yeah, Ron or myself can answer it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put that in as 5-2. That's okay. We have those speakers and Madam CAO will be able to address that. Is that okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem. Just give me a second. Was debris removal and what else?
Arc permit,
Hmm,
archaeological permit.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
I have something I'd like to add.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if we can talk about ways that we can communicate better within our group.
Certainly can.
Okay,
Let's put it in with numbers. Okay, anyway, I got one down. Yeah.
6.2,
Pardon me?
6.2, communications.
Yeah. I can do
oh,
it there.
okay, thank you.
That's okay. Anything else? Had a hand up somewhere. So I'd also like to move in heading under number 7, reports, and move adjournment to number 8.
Reporting is 4.2.
What's that?
That's your report?
No,
Oh,
that's a
okay.
different one. I'm
Okay,
gonna do the
sorry.
report format. The other one, I'm getting people to give reports.
Okay.
That's okay. Thank you. So can I have a motion to accept the agenda as amended?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Have a seconder, please.
Ollie?
I'll second it if nobody else did.
Thank you. So we all have time to read the minutes. Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes from March the 2nd, 2022, Citizens Advisory Select Committee?
Can People
I
hear
will
us?
motion that. Patsy,
Thank you. Have a seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Moving on to number 4. The terms of reference were adopted by council on the 9th of March, are attached to page 48. And 4.2 is reporting, and I'll speak to that as appendix A to the terms of reference. I put a format on that's pretty straightforward, just off of Google, about 2 or 3 of them put together. And if you attend council meetings, we usually all give reports in. So for any of the major points that the committee has to go to council, it's good to get it in writing and a good format into Madam CAO so she can get it into the agenda package. So council members have a chance to read it before the next meeting. So when I speak on the committee's behalf, they'll know what I'm talking about. So that's why that one's there. Moving on to 5. I just want to thank Member Harrison for bringing forward the topics of the variances and grandfathering for today's meeting, and to Madam CAO for arranging for Mr. Matucci and Mr. Dickinson to attend today's meeting and provide a presentation. If there's a resident who has lost their home and finds they have a question, query, or concern regarding the variances and grandfathering, please contact a committee member, and everything possible will be done to secure you an answer. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Dickinson, who doesn't want the floor.
Pardon me, here I am. Variances. The building bylaw. Okay. The state of the building bylaw at the moment is still in flux. We've got all the information that we collated into a document that I haven't quite reviewed yet. And we will, I'll be giving it, circulating with council first, because it was basically the summary of everything that was said to council through various purposes and means, different meetings and emails and everything else. So you'll be seeing that in shortly. The building bylaw continues. So building and zoning bylaws. The zoning bylaws are okay, where do we start? Variances. You can't vary a building bylaw is the simple fact. So whatever regulations we put into the building bylaw, whether it's the ones that are in bylaw 710 or the amending bylaw 711, once they're in there, there's no process to vary them. It's the regulations that the province sets out for municipalities to use to adopt the building bylaw don't have provisions for variances. So if we put them in there, they're in there, and there's really no way to deal with variation. Zoning bylaw, on the other hand, is the provincial legislation actually requires that there be a variance process for zoning regulations. So any regulations that we put in the zoning bylaw are able to be brought forward for council's consideration to be varied. And that process is, it's clearly defined in that there's steps that have to be taken, but the process that council uses to make a decision about the variances is just a process of decision making like council makes in any other case. So you present requests with the variance, the reasons for it, any mitigating factors both for or against, and council makes a decision. And so as you can see, the variances are quite a bit more accessible and can be acted on independently on each circumstance that might be presented by a property or a property owner. Grandfathering is it's a term that is sort of has a broad meaning that isn't actually, they don't use it in law. So it's about existing properties and existing circumstances on properties that may or may not have ever been in compliance with any bylaw or regulation that might apply to them. And some of them can be considered legal non-conforming situations, and other ones are illegal non-conforming. And the legal non-conformities were probably quite common in Lytton area where the fire occurred before the fire. But the fire would have eliminated that legal non-conforming status. So because once a building is destroyed more than 75%, it has to be renewed. And once it has to be renewed, then the renewal has to comply with the current bylaws. So legal nonconformities are pretty much gone. So we're left with non-conforming issues that may be created in the future, which would have to be really dealt with through variances. So I guess sort of the overview, maybe somebody could add to that, Ron Matuzzi, or questions, whatever.
Sure, thanks, Ron. Yeah, I think you covered it. Building bylaw really doesn't have any provisions. Council can amend it anytime. Actually, it's not that hard for council to amend it, but you can't vary the provisions because of certain circumstances. Zoning, you can't vary use, and you can't vary density, but you could vary things like setbacks and building heights and all the, I would call the regulations around the zone. So those are the things that could be varied. As Ron said, in some cases where a building predated the zoning bylaw, if it could be proven it predated the zoning bylaw, that would have been a legal nonconformity. But as Ron said, if the building was completely destroyed, that kind of sets you back now to a new starting point. And they put those in because again, there's no legal term for grandfathering, but they allow the fact that you could be legal and don't conform through a problem that wasn't your problem. The building was built before zoning, but it does create an issue. Now, variances, we're anticipating there could be variances. We know, and speaking to, I've spoken to a number of residents in the last few months, that there's, some of the property lines are, buildings were probably too close to property lines or garages. So there could be a number of situations where variances are needed, but again, there is a process, and that's a matter of council going to council with an application, and then anybody impacted by that variance who deems to be impacted could speak to it. But there certainly is the ability to waive things like setbacks and building heights. I don't think there's anything yet. I think, it'll really come down to a case-by-case basis. Would probably be the best way to say it, is as people, start to plan and whatever, that's when these things will come to bear. And then I think it's a matter of just contacting us and going through it on a case-by-case basis. We're bringing in some changes to the zoning bylaw, but I'm trying very, very hard not to change anything in the bylaw that would cause legal nonconformities or problems. Some of the uses we're adding are things to allow for temporary buildings, that kind of thing, not so much whole-scale changes to the zoning bylaw. So it's really just tuning up the existing zoning bylaw as opposed to making wholesale changes to anything or any of the provisions. If you're in a R1 zone, you'll be in an R1 zone in future. There may be a few more things you could do, but there won't be any less that you could do, which would create a non-conformity. So we're trying to be sensitive to that.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up the questions for the committee. I'll start with Member Gessie.
Hi. Hi, I just had a quick question about, so does that mean then that you're going to be changing some things in the building bylaw to put it into the zoning bylaw?
No, I don't think so. Some of the provisions, so the building bylaw, think of it this way, as it pertains to the actual building, and Ron could address this better, how you build a building, that'll all be in the building bylaw. What we're looking at though is some of those other issues related to the fire resistant kind of provisions, not actually putting them in the building bylaw, but trying to find a better place to put them so that they're, that makes a little more sense. And again, that'll give us more time to be able to work with the community on what those should look like without
Right.
sticking them in the building bylaw where, they come to be a bit etched in stone. So we're trying to get them in place in a way that's suitable and acceptable to the community in a format that is easier to implement. So that's the only thing that'll be more or less coming out of what some of those things may be in the building bylaw. Ron, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that's where I was going to go with it exactly. Basically the 4 sections of bylaw 711, probably all of them, I suggest at this point anyway, would be better off in the zoning area, whether it's an OCP for development permits or actually in the zoning bylaw, so that variances are possible. It's not exactly a given that because you can get a variance or because you can apply for a variance, you'll get one. It's going to be a complicated process. And I mean, really, all those statements in the 711 amendment are based on a lot of science, and any variance that people may want to ask for, I think council would want to have the science behind the change to support it before they would. But that's a council decision that'll have to be made. But my suggestion would be that the report would involve that kind of science. But so, yeah, better taking the 711 issues and moving them into the zoning realm. And as far as the building bylaw 710 part of it goes, there haven't been a lot of comments that in this whole review process that will apply to it. So we'll go through them with council, but most of the comments were on 711.
Right.
So if that is going to move into the zoning area and have a little more time, that's a good thing, because there's more time to think through. There's a lot of comments to look at.
Mm-hmm. So we can expect then that you're going to be looking at moving a lot of stuff around and before the next reading?
Well, that's a council decision. I mean, as Ron Matuzzi said, and I said, that's what we would suggest. But it's on the table as it is. So if it comes off, it comes off and moves into zoning, the zoning area. That's what we'll do. But we'll see.
We think it may be easier, Patsy, to deal with it as an official community plan development permit. It's just easier, and then that gives us a bit of time to really again work with the community and not hold up the building permit side for people who want to go and get a building permit, right? Because if everybody's in agreement with 90% of what's in the pure building permit side of the bylaw, then that's okay. Then let's move those forward, and we'll be looking at those comments, and if there's any tweaking based on the comments. But as Ron said, from his overview so far, almost all the comments were on the fire stuff, not so much on the building bylaw stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you. I think that's good for now. I'll let someone else have questions.
Member Harrison?
Hi. Yeah, so it's a lot to digest, but so people that have concerns about whether they can actually build or not, and have been, in some cases, in one case, and this comes to me secondhand, I didn't hear this from the person, but that they can't build on the property or the footprint they had because it's too close to the sidewalk. They're told that by their insurance people. So, how do people like this move forward would be my question.
Well, they would need a variance for something like that, because that's a setback. Then they would need a variance, would be the mechanism, that would look at it and say, now I don't know sort of what that is. And again, without it's really hard to, figure out what it is if you don't know where it is and some of the items, but any requirement in the zoning bylaw, now there are some setback things that come under the building code, and those are fire separations and things like that. But if it's like the original home was built too close to the roadway and doesn't meet the current zoning, well, that kind of thing theoretically could be varied by council.
Okay, but one of you said that there's no guarantee that these variances are going to be agreed upon, so.
Yeah, yeah, I think not, Ollie, I think not building a home is a pretty big, not being able to rebuild is a pretty big, council usually looks at hardship. I can't speak for council, they'll make the decision and it'll be ultimately their decision. But certainly as a staff person, you try to mitigate hardship where you could. When you're dealing with a lot that's just physically, the configuration of it makes it almost impossible to rebuild. Then I think certainly in my experience, that's the type of thing, I think Ron would agree, you take into consideration in a situation like that. But again, without actually seeing it and seeing what the variance is, it's really hard. But yeah, ultimately it's council's decision, right?
So I guess you would say there's a certain amount of faith involved in the homeowner being able to get the variance.
Yeah, and reasonableness, right? There's some things that I think are absolute. Let's say it was a corner lot, and let's say it was where the house would be built would obscure sight lines. If you're in a corner, there's a sight line that could be dangerous. Well, that might be a tough one to vary, right? Because if you rebuilt the house in the wrong place and now forever you have accidents because nobody can see what's coming around the corner, that'd be an extreme example where, that would be hard. But if it's, the house has to be 15 feet or 10 feet from the sidewalk or the right of way, but is only 7 or 6, so that's a bit different. And again, I would as a staff person look at hardship as, is this an unreasonable request given the limits on the lot? But there is no guarantee, in the end.
Okay. So I guess the other questions I have are really more about logistics, and I'm not sure if we want to take the time to do that right now. I'll just put this question out there and then you can decide whether we want to talk about this right now. Could you find out who to contact for variance permits? Well, it sounds like that would be the council.
Yeah, that's right. They're like, we're going to have a council office, we're going to have staff in it, and eventually that'll be where all that happens. But there will be a form that you can fill out, even online probably. And it can be dealt with through that. So it'll be very accessible. It won't be a puzzle.
I know Leslie's going to say not council, she's going to say staff. I can hear her already waving back. Let Leslie maybe clarify that.
There would be an application process that you would come into the office and get an application. You would fill out the application and then staff would process it and it goes to council from that. You wouldn't go directly to Councillor Hay and say, can you vary my property? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we can all figure that out when the time gets here.
The other thing I was just going to say is it's all within Lytton. Like there's no, as has been so much the case in the last few months, there's nobody else involved in this. It's the Village of Lytton people, it's the Village of Lytton staff, as I sort of neglected to mention, and of course, council making the final decision. So it's all in town. There's no other impacts.
Right, okay. All right, so just one more then. You talked about the non-conforming. So will a rebuild be non-conforming even if a variance is granted?
No, because yes, but it'll be a variance, so it'll be a legal nonconformity. So the variance makes the citing legal.
Okay,
So if somebody applied for a variance in the past, let's say 5-6 years ago, somebody varied to have a building built closer to the side yard. And council granted a variance. That variance is supposed to be registered on title. So if the variance is registered on title, then that runs with the title. So that's an example of a legal non-conforming because it has been varied. But we'd have to know that it was actually varied in that process, right? If not, then they'll need to do it again. So it should be known. It should be known if it was a legal variance.
it should be no.
It should be on title, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. All right, well, that's, that'll do for now. I may have a question after everyone else has had a chance.
Thank you. Member Hogan?
No, Ron just answered what I was gonna ask because my sister did have a variance on her side yards. The building said to be 5 feet away from the neighbor's fence, but she got a variance to 4.5 feet when she
Yeah.
did her home prior.
Yeah. So that should be good, John.
I'm good.
Thank you. Member Michelle?
I don't think I have any questions for this. Mine have been answered. Thank you.
So I've got a couple if I can, then I'll run through our committee one more time. I guess my biggest one is, how can we assist the residents? I'm a resident, I don't even know what we're, can there somebody we can go to and say, this is what I'd like to build, and do you think it fits? Because a lot of our people moved here way back when they bought houses that were already built. They wouldn't even know there had been a previous variance on it. And they're gonna need help, because what we'll end up with is 1 or 2 come looking for variances when it should have been 40 or 50 coming. Can we get something in place for that?
I'm looking at Leslie.
Yeah.
It's a village function, so I'm looking at Leslie. Yeah, I think you're gonna need something. The form it takes, I'm not sure, but the ability for people to come in with questions and again, I'll let Leslie finish, but I think one of the tough parts will be because there are no village records. That'll be the hardest part. But I think we just work through it. I think we take what information we have, we try to find what we can. But I think we'll need to be setting up that ability for people to ask the questions and come into the village office. We're hoping to have that so that people could come, and then maybe we set it up and say, on a certain day, Ron or myself or somebody who can answer that question, another planner or whatever, we'll be there and we'll try to answer these questions and set up that schedule, Ian. But Leslie, if you have.
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing. Usually, especially in a smaller community, you have the building the building official usually does 1 day a week or 2 half days or whatever, so you could do that. But then the land titles part of it, if you think that there was a variance previously, I think it's like $35, and I haven't done that for about 3 years, so I could be wrong, but it's around that amount of money that you could do a land title search on the property, because the village,
Alexis, stop. Sorry, folks.
the village wouldn't pay for the land title search, but you definitely could do a land title search. And that would tell you what was on that property. You might be surprised.
Yeah, the other thing about that search, Leslie, is that before anybody gets a building permit, which should probably be the reason they came in the first place, they're going to need that search. So
Yeah, that's correct.
it's money that they're going to spend when they get their permit anyway. So it's not lost expenses. It's just part of the process.
Yes. And then as far as the communication question, we could draft something up to start, once we've got the bylaws in place. We would draft communication, media releases for people so that they understand, that there are, we could do some points into that and then send it out, have it on a newsletter, which we're working on actually implementing so that people that don't have social media or, internet will actually get a paper copy in their mailbox. So we'll communicate it out to people how they can go about these things.
And just to chime in on the coming to town periodically and talking to people, that's, as you said, Leslie, many small towns work that way. And, I've done it in everywhere from Wells to Colmont, and that's how you do it. And you definitely need that face-to-face time with the applicant to draw pictures on a piece of paper and maybe even walk out to the site and have a look. But yeah, Councillor Hay, to answer your question, that's going to be an
Thank you.
integral part of it. I just don't know quite how that's going to work at this point.
So, the other one I've got is the word that came up that even I get lost on a bit. What does the word grandfathering mean? And it doesn't come into what has happened to our village.
Well, again, we talked about that a little bit before, and grandfathering is not a defined term by any means. It means some sort of a non-conforming situation that has been allowed to exist or has been created through some other process, maybe a process when there were no regulations, or maybe the regulations of the day allowed it. So it would just be grandfathered through that process, which is a general term that isn't accurate. So as we talked about a little bit earlier with the legal non-conforming and illegal non-conforming and varied properties, that's all part of the grandfathering. But I think through this process going forward, we're probably going to be moving any of those kind of non-conformities through some kind of process that will make them legally non-conforming.
And my last question is, usually this is done, the variance is done on one building when it's being built. We're gonna get hit with about maybe maximum of 60. What about being able to handle them? And my second one would be, what about the commercial buildings? Are they able to apply for variances also?
For the land use stuff, the zoning stuff, for sure, anybody can apply. How are we going to deal with the onslaught when all this starts to happen? That gives me heartburn thinking about it, and it has for 6 months already, and I still haven't got a real hard solution. But I think really once all the cleanup is done, it's going to be a little bit easier to sort of visualize actually building a house or a property or doing whatever you want to do. And I think opening up the process to apply for permits and things, if we do it early, we'll have a few months for people to think about these things and maybe get the variances going and that. So that's I think the best idea. That what's the only idea I have at the moment.
The other thing, Counselor, is, in terms of variances, if we find that there's a particular aspect of the zoning bylaw that's creating the need for variances, and it might be just quicker to change the zoning bylaw. So if nobody in the village can build within 10 feet of the road, they all were, maybe the setback is something different. And the only proviso I put in there, and I'm going to thought after Ron, when your earlier comment, is generally that's the case. Main Street is a highway, and highways would have some provincial, may have some provincial. So if you're on Main Street, that might have an extra layer of scrutiny. But I would say if we're starting to see an awful lot of the same variance required, rather than make everybody do a variance, it may be just easier to, if council agrees, to just change the zoning bylaw within legal parameters of highway and or fire setbacks, or some things that may actually bump into another jurisdiction. But I think that would be the easier way than to deal with 60, 70 variances.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm gonna go back through the committee again. Member Geffey, you had your hand up anyway.
I had my hand up because I was trying to clap at Ron's comment about having heartburn. But anyways, I did get a message from someone and they're concerned. I know you said we'll be looking at further discussions on some of the topics that came up in the comments from people, but one of the ones that was of concern, which I don't know how it would fit in, is the RV storage. So does that fit into setbacks, or is that just a regular provision that the people are given for their vehicles?
Yeah, RV setbacks are normally, well, it's not RV setbacks. RV placement on a lot is sometimes dealt with in the zoning bylaw, right? If they may mention it or not. If it's related to the fire issues, then again, that's something that we'll have to look at. I mean, that's, again, what does that mean in light of those regulations? You know, I think the way to look at those regulations is that they're, you know, as Ron said, I think these are the best suggestions and recommendations by people who understand fires and how they spread. Ultimately, what's approved is something the community can live with. And, you know, and in the end, it's about risk management, right? I mean, how much are you prepared to live with to mitigate that? So there is going to be time. And I think, you know, some of the earlier concerns, I think, you know, we'll work through. I mean, you can have trees and you know, it's not like, you know, Lytton will become, you know, Arizona or something. There's nothing but sand and cactus. You know, I think that there are ways to deal with it. I think we just have to learn what those ways and build back smarter and safer. But I don't think it has to be as restricted as maybe those first impressions. And I think we're going to have a bit of time to work with the community through those and have the community through council really set what is the acceptable level of what the community is prepared to live with. Ultimately, it's your community, right?
So we can look forward to some actual community consultation around some of these bylaw issues, you know, directly.
Yeah, like I said, I think that's why Ron said we may take the 711 provisions and put them in a different area, like maybe an official community plan development permit, and then let's go through that. And I think that would be a good thing for this committee to start looking at. You know, what are those things is just too onerous and not realistic. We're already looking at some of the setback things as well. I mean, you know, we're hiring Blackwell to look at, you know, fire and some of the problems related to the slopes and how to mitigate. Well, if we mitigate some of the impact, then maybe those setbacks can be relaxed rather than, you know, have them in place. So I think there's more work that has to be done. Certainly any of those fire components are not a fait accompli. They're really just on the table for the community now to work with.
Super. Okay, that
Ron,
answers my question.
I just want to add a thought to that. We were all talking a couple of days ago about this too, and one of the ideas that came up, and I think it's a really good one, is that we'll have a meeting with the public in Lytton on the ground, looking at a lot or two or three, and we'll lay out what the setbacks mean for various things with strings or tape or whatever, and people can actually kick the dirt and walk around and see what it actually means to them, so that it gives a little bit more like everybody's different. They conceive things differently, but if it's laying there on the ground, it's pretty easy to understand what we're talking about. And so that was, I think, a great idea, and we'll probably just pursue that as we go on through the zoning aspects, which is the big setback piece.
Right. Wow. Okay, that sounds great. Okay, thank you.
And unlike Mr. Chairman, unlike Mr. Dickinson, I don't have heartburn worried about building permits. I'm kind of looking forward to the day where that becomes my biggest problem, is dealing with too many building permits. Of course, he'll be dealing with them, but I thought it'd be a good day.
Well, hopefully no one will end up with a bad heartburn.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Member Harrison?
Yeah, so I was happy to hear both Rons there talking about how things can move forward, because it felt like we were pretty stuck there for a while with the way the bylaws were looking. And that, I think that gives people a lot of hope, you know, about things aren't set in stone and we still have a voice in this. So, you know, I'm just thinking around, because one of my questions that I got was around fruit trees in the backyard. And the person writing it felt like they were being told no fruit trees, but maybe as we move along, we'll find ways that we can have fruit trees in the backyard. And the other one was around propane tanks. Is that completely off the table? Are we completely not going to be able to use any kind of propane in Lytton? That's the way that some people have understood that. So that's one of the questions I want to ask you right now.
Okay, so yeah, the way what you see in the 7-Eleven appendixes says that the huge setback from propane tanks will eliminate the viability of them. They just won't, you know, you can't fit them all into the yards. But there's ways to mitigate that, and I think that between the report that Ron referred to from Blackwell and the Fire Smart report and the original one that sort of is the basis for the bylaws that you're looking at in 7-Eleven. I think once we put all those together, there'll be a way to deal with it somehow. Because I really don't believe that Lytton can be rebuilt without propane as a heat source. And we're not going to have natural gas infrastructure. We're not going to have anything that can equal what the propane systems
Ron, I
provide.
have a question. What about heat pumps? Sorry if I'm jumping in, but what about heat pumps? Because that provides cooling in the summer as well.
That's right. It's a great idea. And yeah, they can, well, they'll still need in a heating season another additional source of heat, because they only work for 50 or 60% of the heat demand for most houses. So, but that could be electric. But do we want to be in a position where you can't have propane in Lytton? And from the stuff I've been reading and hearing, I don't think that's what the people want. I think they want to be able to choose propane if they want to. But
can I just add to that, Ron?
Sure. Yeah.
So
Please.
yes, because we had a heat pump, but heat pumps have their limits. As you said, they only go to a certain temperature, and then you have to have something else that's going to kick in for your heating. And I think the concern of the person who wrote this was about the number of times that our hydro goes out in Lytton. And really, we need a backup source because if you're running your heat pump with electric kicking in as your backup, and the hydro goes out, then you don't have any heat either. So I think the concern the person was putting forward was what happens when the hydro goes out. We don't have any other heat source. I mean, right now, everyone has a stove or wood stove. Not everyone, we didn't. A lot of people had wood stoves. And so that is the concern about no propane.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's what you were saying.
Well, it is. And it gets back to what Ron Matuzzi mentioned earlier about hardships. Like that, in my view, would be a hardship on a lot of people in Lytton. And I think some consideration needs to be taken to address it somehow.
Right. So the only other thing that I have to say was that I was thinking about that land titles office. So is there a possibility then, by what you're saying, that some of these people who have variances to build on the side, along the sidewalk, have had them in the past, might have been 50 years ago or whatever? Is there a possibility that those variances are registered with land titles office, and should they be checking to find that out?
There's definitely a possibility, but the variance process might not have included that land title action in the day whenever they were varied. In which case we would have to, as Ron said earlier, go back and create a variance process for it. But yeah, so check first for sure. Anything that was registered, it doesn't go away. It's held on the land title, and it'll be there until the owner takes it off. So it'll be there. If it was ever on the land title, it'll always be on it.
Okay, so that should be their first line of action, is to check with the land titles office. And you were saying they're going to need that anyway at some point, so it's not wasted money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe just a thing too, I'm the new guy on the block in town, but I would certainly say, looking at some of the pictures, the sidewalk came after the house, not the house after the sidewalk. Just by looking at the new sidewalks, look at the old pictures of the old days of the horse-drawn carts and that with the hotel map there, that sometimes the village has put the sidewalk in the roadway to do it and up against the private property. So anyway, just want to throw that in. Mr. Hogan, oh, sorry, Ron, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say about the sidewalk. That's a visual thing. Then you can kind of assume that the edge of the sidewalk nearest your house is probably your property line, but it isn't necessarily. And so what we've been talking about just in the last week is about how the survey work will be done to establish where the property lines are. And that's the real setback thing. It's not necessarily from the sidewalk edge. It could be that property line could be, as you said, possibly in the sidewalk, and it also could be like, several feet back into your property line, depending on where the sidewalk wound up going. So there'll be some certainty on that going forward. But for the most part, we'll probably be able to establish where the property line is for visual purposes, not legal right away.
Yeah, and I should know this because I've read your zoning bylaw ad nauseum for the last few weeks. And some zoning bylaws, and yours is pretty boilerplate. It follows, what you see in most zoning bylaws. It's not that unique. Sometimes have a provision that where there was a taking for something like a sidewalk or a road widening that renders a lot non-conforming, then the lot is deemed to be conforming for most purposes. So I don't remember that provision there, but I know Kelowna had that provision. So again, if they added a sidewalk and now the sidewalk shrinks your front yard setback, because it's a sidewalk and a community good, they sometimes view that as still conforming, although it doesn't technically. But I'll have to check the wording, but that may be something we could look at too. If that becomes a problem, it may not be a problem, but if it does, then we could look at it.
Super, thank you. Member Hogan?
So just to confirm, who's going to be checking the surveys? Like, I know my neighbor, they had their little garage and part of it was built on village laneway kind of thing.
Okay, so there have been surveyors working in Lytton off and on ever since the fire, and probably before that, but since the fire for sure, to find out where pins are, where property lines are, that sort of thing. And it's a work in progress. They've got some of their, they call them monuments, but points in Lytton that they can work off to find out property lines. But they need more. So that's a discussion that James has been having with the survey team about how to get more points. At the end of the day, when you're coming to the point where you're getting a building permit and trying to figure out, John, whether that little shed is on the lane or in the yard, a surveyor can figure it out without pounding pins into the corners and doing all those expensive things. They can find it out by shooting off of existing pins. And I think where we're going to be with Lytton is there will be enough pins that a surveyor will be able to find the property lines without putting pins in each corner of the property line. So it's going to be a less expensive approach to finding out things like the shed that's not on the property, or the house that needs to be exactly 1.5 meters from a property line. A surveyor will be able to say that it is through their processes. So we're working towards that.
We're anticipating quite a bit of that, John. Pretty common in most communities. Over time, people didn't necessarily look that closely and things were built. So we're anticipating some of that kind of variances that are going to have to happen, and it would be unusual if they weren't, right?
Super, thank you. Member Michelle?
In regards to the variances, so say somebody decides to sell their property, does the variance go with that sale, or do you lose it then and the new owner has to apply?
Now, if the variant was registered on title, then it runs with the title. It doesn't follow the owner, it follows the title.
Okay, thanks.
Super, thanks very much for that. We'll move on to 5.2 with the same panel. Madam CAO probably will be joining in this one. So, Member Michelle, you just want an overview of the debris cleanup and the archaeological permits? Or is there something, well, you can get your specialty, I guess, in when the questions come. So we'll just do an overview, if we can, from the panel.
Well, we would want to probably understand what the questions are.
There's been a lot of questions about it. Like, so for myself, I'm insured. I have a limit of roughly 25,000 for debris removal. My bid come in at over 33,000. So we're told that with that government funding, uninsured or underinsured will be covered. But how is that going to work? Because I'm with the JS Held group. So they were supposed to be awarding those bids. So do they award the bid to a contractor for my $25,000 and then they stop all work and then your guys's like MatCon comes in and finishes, or how is that going to work?
I'll start and then Ron can finish.
Leslie, just to interrupt. I see Yvonne has her hand up. She put it up pretty quick, so she may want to wade in before I do.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yvonne, you have the floor. She's not been let in.
Oh, Sierra, can you let Yvonne
She's
speak,
on
please?
mute, that's why.
There we go. Sorry about that, Yvonne. You should be able to unmute now.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so just to speak quickly, we don't know exactly how it works, but in terms of the Red Cross and how we were supporting the community with the debris removal has changed with that additional funding that you received last week. But what I can say is that the gaps will be filled in, potentially through the Red Cross for insured parties that, well, ultimately are underinsured or inadequately insured. So if you find yourself in that position and it doesn't look like there's any other way to cover those additional costs, please approach the Red Cross caseworkers. And if there's a way that we can fund all or part of that difference that's not covered, we're here to work with you on that.
Good.
So with that government announcement, it's not guaranteed that we're going to get it. Because the last time I spoke to a case manager at Red Cross, I was told anyone insured that they don't duplicate any support. And because I've already got insurance, I don't qualify for anything.
Yeah, you would technically then, like you said, the debris removal, you're covered for 25,000 and it's coming in at 33. So technically you're underinsured and like this process and the language and how we're able to fund, it's changing all the time, and particularly now with the funding that you guys have received. But it does not mean that we're not able to provide other Red Cross resources or funding to you. So if you do have a Red Cross caseworker, stay in touch with them, because we're not 100% positive of what our role is now with this additional funding. It's fluid. It's going to be changing, and I'm just encouraging you to stay in touch, because yeah, technically you are underinsured, and those are the gaps that we're able to fill.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So does
And
that
then-
help, Melissa?
Yeah, then I also had questions asked about the archaeological permitting and monitoring. So my insurance covers none of that. And from the people that I've talked to, nobody is covered. So how do we go about getting funding for that part?
So part of the provincial funding is to cover the ARC work.
Okay, do you need that package, right of entry permit package? Does that have to be filled out for that?
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, if you have an insurance company, and if it's held, then they're sort of coordinating all that. And they'll be coordinating that with James Hay. And so that there's, so if you're insured, you really you shouldn't have to do anything. They should be looking after that. You know, applying and dealing with the Heritage Committee, probably on bulk. They probably are gonna go forward. But the province is paying through for that. It's just a matter of, you know, how it gets put in place. So, you know, as Yvonne said, you know, one of the problems we're having, so, you know, you have to bear with us here, but generally speaking, uninsured events are not covered by some kind of government support. I mean, they're just not. And so everything that's happening, whether it's heritage permits or the underinsured or the uninsured, that's fairly unique. And so, you know, it's a bit of it's a work in progress, and people are trying to, you know, even Yvonne and the Red Cross have been brought in early and you know, said, okay, look, we're going to help with the debris removal from site to curb, and all those things are put in place. But as we started looking at the underinsured, and those became an issue, you know, I think governments had to sort of react. So I wish I could tell you, yeah, it's, you know, this is the way it's all going to work and it's perfect. Some of it's in a state of flux. What we do know is the heritage permit will be paid for. And it's just a matter of how that's coordinated, and the insurance companies should be working with James right now, and the process on how you shouldn't as an individual have to worry about it. If there are problems, then, you know, we'd like to know about it, right? Because we're trying to put that process in place and try to do it as easy as possible. You know, we don't want to overwhelm the heritage branch. We don't want to, you know, we want to be able to kind of do this as coordinated as possible.
Okay, thank you.
The other part of the thought process, just really quickly, is that we want to make sure all properties can be clean, so that, you know, you don't have 5 and then 1 that's not, and then 10 and 1 that's not. So that's the team has really been wrapping their head around how to make sure that can happen for everybody as well.
So we just work. Member Michelle, is that all your questions?
Yeah, those were the questions that I had received from some of the other residents as
Super.
well. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Hogan?
I have nothing further right now.
Thank you. Member Harrison?
No, I think, oh, I think I'm good. Is my mute off here?
Yep.
Okay.
Member Getsy?
Dory, what are you asking me?
Do you have any questions for the panel?
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Matucci and Mr. Dickinson, Madam CAO, for enlightening us on more things, and also for members of the committee as to some of the answers we received today. We got to get it disseminated among the people that have questions and help put their, if I can use the word, put their mind at ease a bit more. So we're moving on now to number 6, 6.1, 2 positions open for the committee. We had 2 committee members, Member McCann and Member McGuire, who resigned for personal reasons. There were 3 alternate personnel that were passed in council by resolution. I've got messages out to them. They haven't got back to me as yet to find out what their status is, whether they're still interested in serving or not. Once I get answers from all of them, I will get email out to everybody on the committee. The next one is 6.2, communications. Member Getsy, do you want to speak to what you would like with that? Please.
Okay, so basically I'm just finding that it's quite difficult for me to feel as though I'm reaching everyone. And I was wondering if there was some way we could have a clearer way to communicate. I did happen to notice there was a website that was made by some community members in Oregon. They called it After the Fire, USA.org. And it's got some interesting insights on it. And I wondered if maybe that might be a way for us to be able to communicate better. So I'm just sort of wanting to brainstorm about ideas. I don't know what to suggest, but I feel as though we either need to have the lists and we need to have specific residents we're contacting, or I wouldn't mind it if they could answer and speak their own questions somehow. So if we had some way to have an open dialogue going, not when a meeting is on, but just ongoing, like a Facebook group or something. I wonder how everyone feels about that. Maybe I'm the only one who feels like that. Is that clear? Did that make myself clear?
Yeah, thank you very much. Member Harrison, comments?
Well, actually, Patsy had sent that information on to me as well, and I totally agree. I think it would be great if we could get some sort of communication where, yeah, where the residents are all putting their questions into the same, I don't know, dialogue of some kind. And so that it's like a brainstorming where people would be, like I get a question from someone, I don't necessarily know the answer or have any input for it. So I'd like to put that out for the rest of the committee before we actually get to the meetings. And yeah, I like this idea of the .org. I don't know if that's possible for us to do at all, but I like the idea.
Thank you. Madam CEO will speak to it too.
Yeah, Member Harrison, what we can do is if you want to pass a resolution that goes up to council, because that would take staff time, but I do see there's different avenues that could be done in order to make that work. I mean, it'll take some money and time, but I think it's really important, yeah.
Okay, well, I think Patsy, since you brought that forward, Patsy, maybe you could make the resolution. Hello, Patsy?
I'm here, yeah. I'm just trying to think how to word it.
That
I
the community,
can
the
honestly-
Citizen Advisory
I've never
Committee
made-
recommends to council,
Say that again?
that the Citizen Advisory Committee recommends to council
That we
That-
formulate a
communication
communication method platform so that the residents are able to join in freely. I've never made a motion before. I'm new at this.
You're doing a great job.
Yes, yeah. So that the Citizen Advisory Committee, or that you recommend to council to request a communication platform be set up for the purposes of residential input and inquiries.
And discussion and brainstorming, yeah, dialogue.
Can I speak too?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Well, I just liked your idea because you had also said about a list of the residents that each of us is communicating with. And I think it would be helpful if we all knew one another's people that we're communicating with. And then people can suggest those that we have missed, because I know there's a lot of people we don't have on there. But I'm also thinking about those who don't have computers when we're
Yeah.
doing this communication thing. So somehow to reach them as well.
So that was the idea of a newsletter. The new communication person, Yvonne and myself have been discussing. And then this committee could provide input. It would just be a matter of how often would you do the newsletter. So once you get answers, you get questions submitted, we get some answers, you know, did you know, or Mythbusters, or however you want to do it. It would go into a newsletter that then would be mailed out to households. So probably wouldn't be more than every 2 weeks, I would assume.
I think
That hits the people without website, or, you know, sorry, internet and Facebook, I'm sorry.
I think every 2 weeks is often enough.
Yeah. Okay.
But the other thing that I wanted to point out is that I don't have a lot of communication with my other committee members. So maybe this would help with that as well. Because I'd like feedback from them.
And what do they think right now? Is there any other comments?
Yeah.
Too.
So is this moved and seconded then?
I need a seconder for the motion,
And then you can discuss.
then we can discuss.
Oh, yeah.
Robert's rules.
Okay, I'll second it, and I apologize. I should know better.
Sorry. Low blow. Member Hogan?
He just signed off.
Oh, did he? Member Michelle?
I think that it would be a good thing to have. And I'm the same as Ollie. I don't have too much communication with everyone, and emails don't seem to work because I'm always dealing with work emails too, so they get missed and I don't see them right away. So I think it'd be good if we could have some platform. Thanks.
Super.
That would be a separate issue. So, well, I'm just thinking that the second piece is not part of this resolution, but it's definitely something that needs to get in place. So that would be I think that should be formulated amongst the committee, not a council decision on how the committee communicates. Does that make sense?
Are you talking about the interactions between the committee members themselves?
Yeah. So right now, there's a recommendation on the table that needs to be voted on, that the Citizen Advisory Committee recommends to council that a communication platform for residents and dialogue be set up for community. So platform for residents to dialogue, and that it's be set up as for community members. Sorry, my wording isn't quite right there, but I know what you want. But the second piece, that's for community.
Yeah, it's internal.
Yeah, but the second piece would be internal, yeah.
So I need all in favor, and we haven't got a quorum when Johnny left.
Okay,
I'll take that as direction. Not have to,
yeah.
I'll take it.
So Melissa, Patsy, all of you guys are the ones that are left. I wonder, I'm just trying to brainstorm in my mind, like sometimes there can be chat. You know, you can set it up for a certain time of the evening. You guys would do a chat on Teams or something like that. Think about it. Anyways, they need.
I'll get in contact with everybody by email. Patsy, I just wanted to point this out. The motion can't get voted on, okay? Because Mr. Hogan has left. We don't have a quorum anymore. I will take that as direction for me to carry it to council. All right?
Okay, so it's not being held over till the next meeting.
I'll take this to the next council meeting.
Which is Wednesday, next week?
Yeah, next Wednesday. Okay, we do not have a quorum that your motion can be voted on. So I'll just take it as direction and we'll do it.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
No, thank you. Okay. Does that answer your member guess? Is that good enough now for your communication? And we'll get our
Oh,
way
yes,
through.
thank you very much. And we could work as a council or a committee together and figure out the rest.
Certainly. So moving on then. Number 7 I put in was reports. And this has got a bit to do with what you were just talking about. At council meetings, we do reports from everybody, staff and council members. And I think we will get in the agenda from now on, reports from the committee members to let us know. Because in a lot of cases, we're working in isolation and we can find that 3 people bring up the same problem, then we know it's a bigger problem than just from the one. So what I propose to do on the agenda from now on is have reports as a title, and then we'll each person can report, and then we can have a little discussion afterwards. That way we can talk about who we've talked to and all the good stuff. Are we okay with that? I'll have to wait till the next meeting before we get a quorum to get it voted on.
Okay. I like the idea of letting each other
Yeah.
know what we're doing.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll get that on the next agenda. So having completed the day's events, can I get a motion for adjournment? Please.
One question before we adjourn, please.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
I missed earlier when I was going to ask. So for the finalized terms of reference, I was asked about number 3, where it includes donation disbursements. So are there still donated funds available? Because I know someone's used to offset the water and sewer, right?
So there is, Melissa, this is Leslie. So there are some, yes, there's donations left. There's a staff report going to council on next Wednesday in regards to the unmet needs committee there was a terms of reference that was adopted in December. And
Okay.
So there's some people that have submitted their names for that. There'll be options provided to council on how they want to handle it. The other thing is we've got $57,000 worth of gift cards from CN that we only just received a couple of weeks ago that actually expire in June. So actually, the 3 of you folks, maybe you've got some suggestions. I thought that take, because it's hard to distribute that quickly, maybe it should be used to purchase food for the relief centers. I don't know. Not sure how else to get that out there that quick.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because I was just asked about it. So I was just wondering, like, if that is something that we can do, is put forward recommendations that we've heard from citizens.
Yeah, I would like to hear them, sure, yeah.
If I can comment that one, Member Michelle, they were gonna bring that under this committee, but it was decided that handling everything was gonna be too much. And because you have to, for a select committee, you've got to have a member of council on it. And one of our other members is working full-time. So you'll probably see the unmet needs come in as a separate committee, probably after the election. We have another member of council that can take it over. Not
Okay.
take it over, sorry, be a member of it as per the community charter.
Yeah, and so our chief financial officer has been tracking all the donations that have been coming in. It's taken a bit to catch up to the first few months because he didn't come on until late October. So we're tracking that, and like I say, but my biggest concern right now is the $57,000, or maybe it's 53, I can't remember exactly, but it's over 50,000 in gift cards that need to be used before June. So, I mean, without bothering anybody's or upsetting people, to me, my only suggestion is that it would go to the food banks. But how do you people have, Ollie, Patsy, Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm thinking.
Well,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Patsy.
I think $50,000 worth of food is quite a lot to all of a
You
sudden.
have until June, so you could, my thoughts, sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. And
Yeah.
it's not my decision, but
No,
the thought process was you could do April, May, and June.
So what
But
are
we
these?
should
Right.
find out the statistics of how much the food bank is even being used, I guess.
Who were these gift cards given out for? Like, who are they supposed to be for?
Well, they're given out from CN for the village of Lytton to hand out.
Probably an extension of the one we got down Anderson Creek way back last year.
So it's an extension of that.
I don't know, I'm just saying, probably.
Well, are we being recorded? Apparently the fellow from CN that was in charge of them kind of forgot about them for a bit. So somebody got a hold of me from a colleague of mine that knows that person, and that's how we ended up getting a hold of them.
I think what we gotta do, we'll get more information on it and get it in council, and then I'll bring it back to us. How's that?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that we're.
Oh, yeah, no, you're not making a decision tonight.
No,
I've never
and I
seen
don't
good
think-
women like you being on, you know, I mean, 3 months to spend 50 grand, that is no problem at all.
I'm just letting you know there will be a council report, and in the report, that potentially be one of the suggestions as an option that council considers.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Leslie. I, for one, don't want to comment. I think we need to go back to some of the residents at least right
Yeah.
now and see what they think.
We'll also see what CN said they're for.
Well, that would be good if
For
you
the
could find
residents.
that out.
Yep.
They might have some ideas.
Yeah, well, no, actually, they don't want to, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, okay.
There is a council resolution that quite late June, August, September maybe, that said to any gift cards like that would be done by a draw, but I don't know how you do that.
No, but I know when they gave out the ones at Anderson Creek, they were good until July. They were good for a full year. I still got mine in my pocket. I never
Yeah.
used them. But anyway, can I get a motion that the March 16th, 2022 Citizens of Irish Select Committee adjourn?
I would
Please.
adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
I'll
Next meeting,
second it.
don't need a seconder. Thank you anyway.
Okay.
The next meeting will be held 4 o'clock, April 6th, 2022. Thank you very much for everybody's attendance, and spread the word that we're doing good things.
All right, thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you. And we did.